Hello and welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In today's video, we are going to unbox, reveal, discuss, and upgrade the Exit from Exile Commander Legends Dungeons & Dragons Battle for Baldur's Gate Preconstructed Commander deck. Thank you for choosing MTG Burgeoning for your Magic the Gathering content. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video and consider becoming a subscriber. Doing so supports the channel and makes you eligible for our various subscriber rewards series. If you would like to support the channel further, then click the link to our Patreon page in the description below. There you can join our ongoing Pack Wars series as a 1-month supporter or ongoing member. Or try joining Pack Wars for free by commenting on every MTG Burgeoning video in a month. We strive to offer creative rewards through our various Patreon tiers. So if Pack Wars isn't for you, then something else will be. Links to our content and various subscriber rewards series can be found in the description below. Send us an email, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram. We are your channel for all things magic. Greetings and salutations to the MTGBC, that is, the MTG Burgeoning community. Hello and welcome back to another installment of Let's Open Up Some Preconstructed Commander Deck Madness. Today, it's Exit from Exile, and once we remove the seal, we will liberate the contents, and there's no going back. So the box has been opened. So let's feast on the goodness inside. There is our deck box. And that has to be some of the coolest art I think I've ever seen. All right. Yeah, that'll work. All right. There's our deck box with our deck. We pull this through and that goes into the recycling pile. There we have our very, very off-centered tokens. Look at that. Oh, that is a disappointment because I do punch and keep those bad boys. Well, maybe not this set of bad boys. Wow, that is really off kilter. Oof, so are these too. Look at that. Way off to the side. Holy mackerel. Somebody was not watching their quality control that day. And there's our sweet, sweet card divider. At least that should still have the ability to divide. All right, we have our deck box, which this seems to be the norm. Every single one of these, for as far back as I can remember, comes in twisted or bent like this. Sometimes not connected, other times still intact, but still, it's still showing that it needs some improvement with quality control. But that's not a surprise to me if it's not a surprise to you. All right, packaging is out. We have our mind spinner. Yeah, okay. We have our life spinner there. Our How to Play Magic the Gathering card there. The sweet, sweet 100 cards. And, of course, our sample pack collector booster from Battle for Baldur's Gate. All right, let's get down to business. Gruel business, that is, because we are going to talk about Exit from Exile. And going forth, we are going to do so with the understanding that Faldorn, Dreadwolf Herald, will be the front-facing commander. It will be the general of this 99. So any additional discussions or upgrading we have with this deck is for the purposes of maintaining the awareness that Faldorn is our general. And she is a 3/3 legendary human druid for 1 in Gruel colors. Whenever we cast a spell from exile or a land enters a battlefield under our control from exile, we will create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. And like so many of the commanders these days, it has a built-in effect enabler. Pay 1, tap Faldorn, discard a card, exile a top card of our library, and we may play it this turn. So what we're looking to accomplish with this build is we want to exile cards, we want to cast them, and we want to reap the benefits of creating some 2/2 green wolf creature tokens. This is the primary commander of the build, not to be confused with the secondary pairing option of Durnan of the Yawning Portal. This will be the green legendary creature with the choose a background mechanic. Durnan is a 3/3 for 3 and a green, and whenever he attacks, we look at the top 4 cards of our library, and we may exile a creature card from among them. We put the rest in the bottom of our library in any order. For as long as that card remains exiled, we may cast it, and that spell has Undaunted, which means it's going to cast 1 generic mana less to cast for each opponent we have. And the choose a background will be our mythic red legendary enchantment, which of course is Passionate Archaeologist. It's 1 in a red, and commander creatures we own have, whenever we cast a spell from exile, this creature deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to target opponent. So although I think there is some benefit to having Durnan and the Passionate Archaeologist as the potential pair for commanders, we are going to move forward with the understanding that Faldorn and everything that she does is what we are going to look to accomplish once we get closer and closer to the upgrading part of this video. In addition to our primary commander and the secondary options of Durnan and the Passionate Archaeologist, these are 3 brand new additions to Magic's catalog. And now we are going to talk about the other 7 brand new cards that are in the Exit from Exile deck. And we're going to begin with Delayed Blast Fireball. This is an instant 1 and 2 red. It's going to deal 2 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. However, if this spell was cast from exile, the 2 damage becomes 5 damage instead. And we don't even need to exile it with any of the exiling effects because we can foretell this card instead. Now, granted, the foretell cost is double what we're going to pay from a mana value standpoint. We're going to pay 2, and then we're going to exile this card face down, and then we'll cast it for 4 and 2 red at another time. I do think that for the doubling of the mana to go from 2 damage to 5 damage is well worth it. Delayed Blast Fireball could end up becoming one of those iconic removal spells right up there with Blasphemous Act. Next up, we have Nalfeshni. I think that's how we're going to say that. Nalfeshni. Got a 4/6 flying beast demon for 5 and a red. And whenever we cast a spell from exile, we get to copy it. We may choose new targets for the copy. If it's a permanent spell, the copy gains haste, and at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice this permanent. This guy is going to give us the best of both worlds, because if it's an instant or a sorcery, we're going to get double the bang for our exiling buck. And if it's a permanent, well, guess what? It's also going to get double the bang. We don't get to say exactly for the whole buck because we only have it for the end of turn, but we do get to have haste, which means we could send that bad boy right into combat. Next up is Green Slime, and this may be the card, this may be the card of the entire Battle for Baldur set, as in the new card that takes the greatest value once the decks are open and have been tinkered with and played with, and then everyone forgets about it, and then suddenly we look back and Green Slime is atop the most valuable cards from these commander decks. So let's talk about this. It's a 2/2 ooze with flash for 2 and a green. When it ETBs, we counter target activated or triggered ability from an artifact or an enchantment source. If a permanent's ability is countered this way, we get to destroy that permanent. And again, similar to Delay Blast Fireball, we have the foretell mechanic. This time, however, we're only going to foretell for 1 green as opposed to having the mana value get higher or be higher than the actual mana cost. So we're going to pay 2 to exile this face down, and then whenever we want to not pay 1 for Rhystic Study, or whenever we don't want to pay 2 for Smothering Tithe, we'll pay a green mana instead, flash this bad boy into play, counter that ability and then blow up your annoying enchantment. That's what Green Slime is going to do, and you watch. 1 year from now, Green Slime, or perhaps Captain Nagathred, one of those two, although I think it might be Green Slime, will be atop the most valuable cards from these commander decks. Next card is Journey to the Lost City. It's an enchantment for 3 and a green, and at the beginning of our upkeep, we exile the top 4 cards of our library, and then we roll a d20. If we get a result between 1 and 9, we may put a land card from among those cards onto the battlefield. If we get a result between 10 and 19, we create a 2/2 green wolf creature token, and then put a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature card among those cards. And then, if we get lucky enough to roll that 20, we put all permanent cards exiled with Journey to the Lost City onto the battlefield, and then we sacrifice it. So, I'll tell you, we have some options here. However, I wonder if this card would be much more valuable in a dedicated dice rolling deck, which I do believe we now have the support to make. Because as we move further and further into this deck tech, it's going to be more and more apparent that there aren't very many dice rolling abilities in this deck. So if we want to maximize what Journey to the Lost City can give us, it might be best in a dedicated dice rolling deck as opposed to keeping it in this Exit to Exile build. Next up, we have Tlinkali Hunter, a 7/7 Scorpion Scout for 5 and 2 green. It has trample, and once each turn, we may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a creature we cast from exile. That is a fantastically powerful ability, and one that could see a great deal of value in a build like this. It also has an adventure for a sorcery 1 and a green. We can exile target creature card from our graveyard, and until end of our next turn, we may cast that card. We are in the colors for ramp. We are in green. We are in red. It is not outside the realm of feasibility that we can play the Retrieve Prey adventure and then lead with Tlinkali Hunter, thereby playing the exile card for free. That is a very real possibility. Again, we are in Gruul colors. All right, next up, new card number 9 of this build is Venture Forth, a sorcery for 3 and a green. We exile cards from the top of our library until we exile a land card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order, and then we exile Venture Forth with 3 time counters on it. All right, so the best possible way to get this card rolling, let's pay it for its suspend for 1 and a green, put it out there with its time counters, and then just let it do what it's going to do. It's going to be very difficult to manipulate the top of our library without any additional cards or effects that are going to allow us to do that. So the best thing would be is to just let venture forth with its suspense, and hopefully we get to exile something other than just getting to that first land card each time we get to cast it. And lastly, we have new card number 10 of Exit from Exile. It is Saravok's Tome, an enchantment for 4, and when it ETBs, we take the initiative. So, to take the initiative, whenever we do so, and at the beginning of our upkeep, we get to venture into Undercity. And very similar to the Monarch, whenever one or more creatures a player controls deals combat damage to us, then that player will take the initiative. And when we venture into Undercity, that is the dungeon with which we are dealing. We begin with Secret Entrance, and we work our way all the way down to Throne of the Dead 3. This is the small dungeon theme that's woven into each of the commander decks from Battle from Baldur. This is the dungeon theme, very small theme woven into each of the Battle for Baldur's Gate commander decks. One that, let's be honest, could very easily be replaced by cards that would be much more fitting and optimizing for the Exile build that we're trying to do here. So, to read forth with Saravok's Tome, we can tap this to add our colorless. If we have the initiative, we tap to add 2 instead. We can pay 3 and tap this to exile cards from the top of our library until we exile a non-land card. We may cast that card without paying its mana cost, but we can only activate that if we've completed a dungeon. And with very, very, very little options to continue traversing through the dungeon to complete Undercity, this is a card that would be better left in a dungeon-dedicated deck than in this Exile deck. And here we see the 10 new cards from Exit from Exile. So what about the reprints? Well, there are 90 cards left in the deck. Let's begin with the non-land reprints. So we have Nature's Lore. Fantastic reprint, let's face it, folks. This is 3 visits, or 3 visits is Nature's Lore, depending on how you look at it. And there is our Arcane Signet. That's another great reprint, of course. I don't know how Command Tower snuck its way in there. We'll talk about you when we get to the land base. All right, we have Demon Bolt. We have Embereth Shield Breaker, Light Up the Stage. So here we're seeing a lot of the cards that are going to allow us to get cards in exile one way or another so that we can trigger Faldorn's ability. So we have Volcanic Torrent, Beanstalker Giants, Beast Within, another great reprint. Every time we see that, you never can have enough Beast Withins. Same thing with Cultivate. Explore lets us play another land and draw a card. Kodama's Reach is another one of those that you just want to make sure you have enough in the coffers so you never run out. Natural Reclamation, Sakura Tribe Elder, Search for Tomorrow, Terramorph. There's our 3 visits. I didn't even think it would be in here. So we have 3 visits in Nature's Lore, which is the exact same card, and Cultivate and Kodama's Reach, which is the exact same card. And we wonder why green has so much success at the commander table. Maybe it's because they just keep playing the same spells with different names over and over again. Grumgully, there's the Soul Ring. You always want to make sure your Soul Ring pile is thick. Aurora Phoenix, Bone Crusher Giant, Dire Fleet Daredevil, the Dream Pillager, Itali, Greater Gargadon, my mistake, Ignite the Future. Is it Chemister? Wow, Jessica's Will. Holy mackerel, Jessica's Will is in Baldur Gate Commander decks. Yamahama, Wowie, Yowie, Lelia, Mizium Mortars, Outpost Siege. There is another fantastic... Oh, wow, seriously? Stolen Strategy, too? Boy, oh boy, there are some strong reprints in this deck. Tectonic Giant, Urabrask the Hidden. Really? Wow, look at this. Holy mackerel. Warstorm Surge is your personalized Pandemonium. Not as fun as Pandemonium, of course. Wild Magic Sorcerer, Rasta Battle Mammoth. Still at Mythic, okay. And Race Forerunners. This is your Crater Hoof Behemoth Light. All right, Azuri's Predation. Ooh, Hornet Queen with some new artwork. Yeah, that could be Night Terror inspiring. Love Struck Beast. Mana Gorger Hydra. That is an all-star. Oh, Primeval Bounty. Wow, this card is so awesome. Very, very cool to see that reprinted in this commander deck. Wow. Boy, the Exit from Exile, they're really tickling Burgeoning's fancy here, folks. Return of the Wild Speaker is solid. Sandworm Convergence, Sweet Gum Recluse, Vivian, Champion of the Wilds. All right, Escape to the Wilds. Xenagos the Reveler. Look at this. Back-to-back, well, not back-to-back, but 2 Planeswalkers in the same deck, and they're not even the Kenrith twins. Boy, oh boy. And we finally finished with Chaos Wand. Wow, all right, so the reprints on this deck, Yamahama, those were some strong reprints. So with this being a 2-color deck, we don't have to have too many bells and whistles when it comes to the land base, and Wizards made sure of that. You gotta have some red mana, you gotta have some green mana, and a couple of utility lands to help pull everything together. So which lands are good enough to stay and which should come out immediately if you have better replacements? Well, let's get right through the land base and find out. Here we have the staple of Temple of the False God, and there's Ash Barrens to help smooth out the mana. Blighted Woodland will help us to search for a couple of basics at the expense of 4 mana and sacrificing the land itself. Myriad Landscape will search for 2, but they have to be the same kind, which isn't that big of a deal because, again, we're only playing 2 colors. Kessig Wolfrun. How about this for a Commander deck reprint? This is one of those cards that with enough mana, and again, remember, we're in Gruul colors, so we should have plenty of mana. We could look to Kessig Wolfrun as a potential win condition in this deck, because we're going to give one of our guys trample, and it's going to get a pretty beefy +X+O boost. Kessig Wolfrun is an automatic stay in any Gruul deck. Of course, the greatest land in the format, Command Tower, that's going to be an automatic. That was a fantastic inclusion, of course, just like in every other Commander deck. And here where we start to get a little bit iffy. I don't know how you feel about the Rue lands, but personally, I would prefer to replace a land like Gruul Turf with something like Rootbound Crag or Rockfall Vale, or maybe even Stomping Ground if it's available, or if the finances are, you know, in the black in pursuing a copy of that, or one's just lying around. But Gruul Turf is one that I would replace. I'm not a big fan of lands that kind of come into battlefield tapped and disrupt tempo. We have to return another land to our hand, particularly in a deck like this where we want to be fast, and up-tempo. Gruul Turf kind of takes away from that, so I'm not so sold on Gruul Turf. And this land here, is this some kind of a mistake? Why is there a snow land in here? Is it just because it gives us a mountain or a forest? You're telling me you couldn't put any other land in this deck that gives us a red or a green other than Highland Forest? For the best of my recollection, there was no other synergy with snow whatsoever in the 99 of this build. But here we have a snow land. I don't know. I have no idea. But that would be one that I would take out for any of the aforementioned replacements. Same thing with Temple of Abandon. It comes into play tapped. Sure, we get a Scry 1, but you know what? It's only Scry 1. Here's another example. This ETB's tapped. Yes, we can pay 4 into it for it to become an elemental, but it doesn't help with our Exile theme. I mean, this is just one of those lands that it looks good from a bell and whistle standpoint, but for the overall synergy and what we want to do with this deck, honestly, I'm replacing this land with something else. Even with the pathway, the Crag Crown pathway, I think would be a better addition than Raging Ravine. Mossfire Valley, that's solid. Here's Game Trail. This is going to ETB tapped unless we show a mountain or forest in our hand. And, well, are there enough mountains and forests in the deck? There sure are. There's a ton of basics. Are we going to have one in our hand if we draw this mid to late game, needing that land to tap for mana for a crucial spell? I would rather have I'd rather have a land that's coming into play like a Carpulsion Forest that I know I can tap for mana that can give me a red or a green. So Game Trail is one of those lands that I'm pulling out. Cinderglade is solid. And here we get to some lands that, well, here's another one. Moss Workbridge. It's going to ETB tapped. Yes, it has the hideaway mechanic. And yes, we should be able to activate that because we should have plenty of creatures with total power 10 or greater. Is it worth it? Is what we're going to exile going to be worth it? That's going to be up to the crafter. That's going to be up to the brewer. For me, I'm taking Mosswort Bridge out, and I'm taking Spine Rock Null out too. It's coming into play tapped. It's only giving me a red. Again, we are going to deal a lot of damage in this deck. It's very, very easy to deal 7 damage to an opponent with this deck. Is it worth the hoops we're jumping through? I don't know. For me, I'm bringing it out. Castle Embereth, it does come into play tapped unless we control a mountain, which, you know, we should be able to have a mountain on our side of the battlefield, whether or not we have this in our opening hand or not. And this is beneficial from a utility standpoint because we're going to pay 1 and 2 red, and we're going to give all of our creatures +1/+0 till end of turn. So with the number of wolf creature tokens we're going to make with Faldorn, in addition to all of our other creatures that are stomping around our side of the battlefield, the investment of 3 mana and tapping this land is not terrible for giving all of our creatures +1/+0. And lastly, we have our basic mountains, of which there are plenty, and the same thing with our basic forest. As I said earlier when this segment of the video began, The bells and whistles for the land base of this deck have been greatly reduced. And lastly, here are the remaining contents of the Exit from Exile Preconstructed deck. We have our ultra-thick version of Faldorn Dreadwolf Herald in that wonderful foil etching. I'll tell you, this bad boy is not going to curl unless you bend it with your own will. That bad boy is staying right there. And then, of course, we have our tokens. We got a wolf, lots of wolf tokens. Well, should have been more wolf tokens than just 3 for Faldorn. All right, we got a spider, a satyr. We got another satyr, a Phyrexian beast, of course, 2 of those. We have a garbage card that will go into recycling, the already shown Undercity and Initiative. And on the backside of these tokens, we have our Convergence Worm, another worm, a beast from our Beast Within, another beast, a human, very, very menacing human there, of course, because with the basket of fruit being followed by chickens, she is ready for combat. Insect for Hornet Queen, insect for Hornet Queen, and there are 4 of them. And there you have it, MTGBC, the contents of the Exit from Exile Preconstructed Commander deck from Battle for Baldur's Gate. Exit from Exile is a Gruul deck that features exiling and wants to reward its pilot with peripheral benefits from casting spells from exile. Remaining mindful of this dynamic, and with the front-facing commander, Faldorn Dreadwolf Herald as the general, the following cards are some possible upgrades to the original deck list, each of which enhances the casting spells from exile theme of this build. Professional Facebreaker allows you to sacrifice a treasure token in order to exile the top card of your library. March of Reckless Joy provides the best of both worlds by offering an outlet to exile cards from your hand, as well as cards from the top of your library, as long as the cards that you are exiling from your hand are red, of course. Valakut Exploration rewards you through one of the fundamental aspects of playing Magic the Gathering, putting lands onto the battlefield. This exile outlet should not be overlooked, particularly since this deck has access to green ramp spells. Catch your opponents by surprise by tapping out and casting Commune with Lava at the end of your last opponent's turn. As close to a free spell as possible, Apex of Power exiles 7 cards from the top of your library and rewards you with 10 mana of any color, as long as it was cast from your hand, which could be a tricky proposition for a deck that wants to exile cards from libraries, but it is well worth the risk. Create additional value with your exile cards and include Soulfire Eruption. With enough targets, you can exile more cards from the top of your library than mana used to cast the spell. Also included is the potential of dealing direct damage to opponents and quite possibly sending some of your opponent's creatures and or planeswalkers to the graveyard. For repeatability, add Oracle's Vault. Each of the first 3 activations will cost 2 generic mana, but once that 3rd brick counter is placed on it, you only need to tap it to exile a card and play it without paying its mana cost. Bag of Holding provides another exile outlet, but with greater selectivity. Urabrask Heretic Praetor exiles the top card of your library each turn, and it also swaps your opponent's first card drawn each turn for an exile effect. Lastly, you are not limited to just exiling your own cards. Mezio Mugger exiles the top card of each player's library, providing opportunities to use your opponent's cards against them. With Faldorn Dreadwolf Herald on your side of the battlefield, you should inundate the board with 2/2 green wolf creature tokens while out-resourcing your opponents. The Exit from Exile Precon deck dabbles in casting spells from exile, an archetype not explored in Magic's history until now. The unique design of this deck is fascinating, even if the payoff from the build's front-facing commander is somewhat underpowered. With enough cards from the Magic catalog to support this theme, the 99 of this deck can be sculpted powerfully to fit its vision of exiling.